Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of album openers looking at a band that I've never heard of before, but is quite interesting just on a band name level. We're continuing on with album openers, looking at tracks that start off an album, and today we're going to be looking at the band Agra- uh, Agoraphobic Nosebleed. Okay. The track is titled Agorapocalypse Now. I don't know why this is such a difficult thing to pronounce. And it comes off of their Agorapocalypse album. So, let's dive into this and see what Agoraphobic Nosebleed is bringing to the table today. Such tight rolls. It's just wild. Yeah, that is that's grind, isn't it? That's the only thing I can think of. It's kind of thrashy, kind of fast, but it's not. It's missing something that I would associate with speed metal. Plus the 2 minute runtime, right? That's what grind is known for, is their short tracks. Um. Anyways, this is just. I've used the term sonic assault before, and I think this definitely falls in line with that. It is a lot all at one time, but I think what's really interesting about it is the diversity. But to talk about the diversity, we need to talk about the standard, status quo. So let's start with that, I suppose. What is this song generally doing? Tons of 16th note strumming, tons of blast beats, I think, a lot of really fast bass kick playing, um, and yelling. We have a little bit of harshes at the end, but most of our vocals are just compressed cleans. And it's these really tight groupings of this, right? We'll have like 3.5 bars of just 16th note wall of sound, and then we'll have half of a bar of something that's just not as full. And we'll get to that in a second, because we actually see a lot of stuff happening in this pocket. But that's kind of what it feels like. We speed up, we hit this high point, and we back it off for a little bit. Then we speed up, and then we back it off. And it kind of feels like being in stop and go traffic at times, where we're going more often than we're stopping, but we do have these little pockets of stopping, of slowing down. And so the song, the song never really feels like it gets going up to speed. Even at, I think, would be the highest point, it still has these little breaks in it. And that is like the status quo. That is our baseline compositional technique here. Is just a lot of sound at a fast tempo and quick notes. And we could even hear the tempo. The drummer had a couple of times where they did stick clicks. It's like bop 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 bop. Like that is a fast tempo. Assuming that they weren't counting in double time, I'm going to assume they were counting standard. Because even if well, I was gonna say no. If it is half of that speed, and they were clicking off eighth notes, yeah, because the song is consistently at that speed, it makes sense to have the clicks up there as well. But I'm still going to read that as quarter notes. That's what makes most sense to me. So then we juxtapose this, though. If our standard is loud and abrasive and just a lot of attacks, what do we do other than that? And that's really interesting because we do bring in some concepts that juxtapose that, only in the minutia, though. For instance, in our core riff, in our verse, we have, uh, like I mentioned, a bar and a half, so 6 of those stick clicks at that speed, at this super fast pace, 16th notes, playing really fast, and then the last two is quarter notes or eighth notes. And it's interesting to have this speed and then this burst of half of that. Sometimes even a quarter of that. Sometimes we do move towards quarter notes. Um, and occasionally we even have a fermata, which was interesting, where we extended out a bar for extra time and allowed it just kind of linger for a second. There were also a couple of retardandos that happened where we slowed down the tempo. We gradually slowed it down and we went right back up. And there's all these little moments, though, of this temporal shifting that happens throughout this track. And for a song that is so fixated on gotta go fast, it's interesting just how often they decide to shift the tempo or the perception of the tempo in a manner that slows the track down, or at least slows the feeling of the track down. And during the sections when we play eighth notes or quarter notes, we haven't actually changed the tempo, but the song feels like it's moving slower. When you mix that up with the retardandos and the fermatas, you have these bursts of slowness that punctuate your aggressive speed. And this is what gives it that stop and go. Stop and go. Nope, that was backwards. Go and stop. Um, and it's just a really interesting temporal flow for the song to be in. It absolutely could be read into thematically. Maybe it has something to do with the lyrics. But strictly on a first time listen, it's it's a bit frustrating, just like stop and go traffic would be. You just want to go. you just you just want to get going. Or in my case, I don't mind going slow. I just I find it really difficult to get into a groove when the groove is consistently changing. I don't mind either one of the grooves. Please pick one. For an elongated time, you just switch to a slower one later, but stay in the slower one for a little bit. That kind of thing. But it's almost like Imagine a like a 15-minute prog epic, right? You're going to have your moving sections, and then they're going to bring it down. They're going to go into something more ballady, and then they're going to bring it up to a peak again, and then they're going to get bombastic, then they're going to bring it back down, and then we're going to explore a slow burn to come back up to a big point. What if you take all these peaks and valleys and you compress it down to a 2-minute song? That's kind of what this feels like. In that manner, I think if we stretch this back out, I don't know that it would be too abrasive, the shifts. I do think that they're still a bit too unweighted and too frequent, and it would still be a bit odd, but it would make more sense in that context, and that might be what they were going for here. What if we take the peaks and valleys of a longer track and condense it down into 2 minutes? What if we convert it from multiple sections of a song to multiple parts of a riff? What happens when we do that? And so it's a really interesting experiment. I don't know if that's specifically what they were aiming for here, or maybe this is just the ideas that might have led into some of these concepts that Grind explores, or maybe this was explored before Grind. I don't know the history of all this. But it is, I think, more interesting in that perspective of applying the ebb and flow of an overall song structure into the ebb and flow of a single riff that is over in a second and a half. Um, and through that, it can sort of be seen as a thought experiment turned physical, actually doing the experiment. It's still not something that I particularly enjoy, but it's interesting to think about. Now, I think the last thing I want to hit before we go to the lyrics is consistency. The vocals, I think, were the least consistent. They're allowed to be. They're just sort of rough, abrasive sounds played over the instruments, and they are not as rhythmically technical as what everyone else is doing. That's not to say that they're not technical in their own rights. There's a lot of things going on with the multiple vocal styles and deliveries. But as far as rhythmic ideas go, they're rather simple and can be played a bit more loosely, which is interesting to contrast with what the guitars and drums are doing, where we are seeing these very tight pockets of quick notes, and played with such precision and finesse that almost makes them sound robotic or machine-like, especially in our bridge when we get those tom rolls. I think they were tom rolls. It could have also been a snare with the snare turned off, um, but it sounded a bit lower, so I'm going to go with a high tom on it. Um, but just perfect every single time. And it was like, I don't know, maybe? 8/16 notes in a row. Just like this burst of equal distant notes, like just machine like, quantized style drumming coming out of a human, I'm going to assume. Um, and just doing like this big roll and then hitting one note and then a big roll and then one note and then back to the big roll, and just like every single time is perfect. The same thing goes for a lot of the fast picking that's going on in their guitar work, especially during the verses. There's just a real sense of precision to it all, um, which is interesting because that's not usually something I attribute to grind. Granted, it's not a genre I have a lot of experience with, so maybe this is more typical than I think it is, but grind to me is a bit more of a sloppy genre. It's designed to kind of have that raw metal punk side, well, early thrash punk kind of stuff, where it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to sound good enough. And this reminds me more of the precision that I expect from technical death metal, more so than what I was expecting, given uh, the grind style. But like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with grind, and it might be that I just have the wrong perception of it. But yeah, that precision is such a prevalent element in this track, and it's just phenomenal. And now I'm waiting for someone in the comments to be like, yeah, this is a one-man project and everything is quantized. uh, it wouldn't surprise me, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and just assume that they're all live musicians playing at just peak performance right here. All right, I'm going to hit the lyrics here, see what's going on, and then we'll wrap this up. Yeah, so we got a track. It's social commentary. It's speaking about, well, it came out in 2009. I think it's applicable today, probably about as applicable as it was in 2009. Um, I don't know where they are from. I thought Rate Your Music had country of origin on it. Maybe I'm thinking of Metal Archives? I don't know. Let's get back to the lyrics though, because I'm getting way off topic here. It is social commentary about the individualistic tendencies that governments like to utilize in an effort to keep us, the class, being ruled from organizing. Um, and that allows the government and anyone that would be in a controlling position, could also include oligarchs, which I think we go into as an element of capitalism here at the end as well, um, to control people because the power is heavily weighted towards those in the position of power. Um, Actually, I forgot about this line. It starts off with capitalism. All avenues blocked off, following the stench of profit. Forward thinking is impaired, all minds closed tight, blinders turned on, widespread hearing loss, suffering or suffocating stagnation, the world stops turning. So because we stop taking big risks and stop doing things that might help people because there's no profit in it, and stop trying and innovating because there's no profit in it, it's better to just continue to rehash things that we know work. We can make the world stop turning on an industrial level, on a scientific level, and everybody else keeps their blinders on. They're deaf to everything around them. They're stuck inside their personal bubble, so there's nothing to worry about. As long as you're fine, then the world must be fine. There's even one a little nod in here to Orwell. Uh, Calls this an Orwellian nightmare. Um, It says we believe what we're told to see, and at the very end, we finish the track off with trudge to work, watching our feet, nothing to look at above our heads. Plugged into our beloved lifeline, never noticing the future at an end. So, once again, keeping your head down is not observing around you, it's keeping to yourself, and that separates all of us. We become an island to ourselves, and it reduces our power because we have power in numbers. It's the only way that we could stop or control or fix the ruling class. Their power is in their literal power, the ability to make rules and all that, to control things. And yeah, like I said, it fits, I think, for what the world was like in '09 from what I remember. And I think it is still fitting today, maybe even a bit more so. And I mean, I'm gonna kind of chalk this up to just being a grind song with lyrics on it, right? They were not necessarily written um, to be tied together. This is the type of music the band makes, type of lyrics the lyricist wants to write about, the vocalist wants to sing about. But there is certainly an urgency to getting this message out. And that urgency and frustration, especially now, given that 13 years later, 14 years later, this song still rings true. There is even more frustration now that this is something we were already recognizing and has not been fixed in a decade and a half almost. The necessity to scream it and say it quickly and get that message out and make sure you're heard fits very well with the entire concepts of the lyrics. Again, I don't think that's necessarily why they wrote it. It does feel like a grind song with words on it. But I do think that they work well together, whether it was intentional or not. So, those are my thoughts on Agoraphobic Nosebleeds, Agorapocalypse Now, off the album Agorapocalypse. What'd you all think? Did you enjoy it? Anything that stood out to you? Did you like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Let me know down in the comments. Above that's a description box. You'll find a link to Linktree in there. It takes you here. You can find my music, links to the Discord server, ways to support the channel, and so much more. On top of that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. Alright, so we have a special selection and a creator request today. We'll be back tomorrow with the album review, and Sunday we'll have our live stream, last one of February. Till next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.